I think, as I've tried to say, that I think nuclear power plants are safe. I also think they're clean. Nuclear power plants produce 73% of the emission-free electricity in the United States today. Because they don't burn their fuel, as happens in a coal, gas, or oil-fired plant, there are virtually no emissions. Coal, gas, and oil-fired plants all emit particulate and or chemical matter, no matter how clean they scrub the emissions from the plant. And I'm not here knocking coal, gas, oil, wind, or solar. That is not the purpose of this presentation. But it is important that you have a comparison to think about when you're thinking about this. We have one of the greatest coal-fired plants in the state right here. And I'm happy that we have it, because we need the electric power in this state. But I want you to also know, scientists say that the radiation coming from a coal-fired plant is 100 times more than the radiation coming from a nuclear power plant. 100 times more. The steam from the water vapor in a nuclear power plant has some radiation, and they actually measure it. But there is also radiation coming out of the coal-fired emissions. And scientists will tell you that it's 100 to 400 times more radiation than in a nuclear power plant. Now, having said that, I also want to quickly say it's harmless. It doesn't hurt anybody, but it's there. And it's the kind of thing that anti-nuclear people want to latch onto to say, look at the radiation coming out of this. It's harmless. The EPA estimates that there are 24,000 premature deaths and hundreds of thousands of cases of lung cancer and heart disease each year in the United States from the emissions of coal-fired plants. We get 51% of our electricity today from coal-fired plants in America. In 2008, nuclear power plants prevented nearly 700 million tons of CO2 emissions. Prevented it. And that's almost the same amount of carbon dioxide emissions that occurs from, collectively, from every automobile in the United States. That's the kind of clean power we can use. Nuclear power is also efficient. Fuel pellets are about the size of the tip of my finger. One fuel pellet produces the same amount of electricity as 19,750 cubic feet of gas, 2,000 pounds of coal, and 150 gallons of oil. It's a very efficient way to produce energy. All nuclear power plants in the United States run at over 90% efficiency. And it's the lowest cost, production cost, that there is in producing power. In 2009, the cost per kilowatt hour of electricity generated for petroleum was $12.37, for gas $5.09, for coal $2.97 per kilowatt hour, and for nuclear $2.03. Now, people that oppose nuclear power are going to argue, but it's the most expensive type of plant to build, and indeed it is. It'll be a $5 to $8 billion project in this county if this is approved and if we can make it happen. However, what they fail to recognize is this. The cost of funding a nuclear power plant is now amortized between 60 and 80 years. When you think about the amortization of debt over 60 to 80 years, it's a great investment for private investors, and that's who builds these things. I recommend anyone willing to take the time to learn about nuclear energy read one of the books I've cited, Power to Save the World or Terrestrial Energy. In the book, The Power to Save the World, written by an anti-nuclear environmentalist, one of Craven's, she decided she was going to research the subject herself and figure out exactly what it was. And what happened was, she became an environmentalist who supports nuclear power. And she recognizes its importance for this country's energy production. Even groups like the Board of Directors of the California Sierra Club at one time voted in favor of nuclear power. They voted for the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant before it was built in California. Their cry then was atoms, not dams. They didn't want hydroelectric dams because of all the displacement of life, animal life. In 1970, the California Sierra Club wrote a crisis report asking for the creation of a nuclear power plant for the city of San Francisco instead of creating another hydroelectric dam. Of course, in the 1975s, the politics of the Sierra Club changed, and since then it has strongly opposed nuclear power. One email that I received from the Sierra Club said that they had sent notices of these meetings to their 18,000 members in Colorado, telling them to be here tomorrow night so that they could speak up, and I hope they do. But environmentalists today are changing their attitude. In 1994, Alvin Weinberg, a physicist, wrote this: "Carbon dioxide poses a dilemma for the radical environmentalists. Since nuclear reactors emit almost no carbon dioxide, how can one be against nuclear energy if one is concerned about carbon dioxide?" In 1996, Al Gore wrote, "Nuclear power, well designed, regulated properly, cared for meticulously, has a place in the world's energy supply." And 10 years or so after that, a lot of the environmentalists are agreeing. Patrick Moore was the co-founder of Greenpeace, and he writes, and I quote, "To me, the air quality, conservation, and geopolitical factors should drive people toward nuclear power being the smartest thing to do in energy. A more diverse mix of voices are taking a positive second look at nuclear energy. Environmentalists, scientists, and media, prominent Republicans and Democrats, and progressive think tanks. They are all coming to a similar conclusion. If we are to meet the growing electrical needs in this country and also address global climate change, nuclear energy has a crucial role to play." Stuart Brand, the noted environmentalist and founder, publisher, and editor of the Whole Earth Catalog, stated, quote, "There were legitimate reasons to worry about nuclear power. But now that we know about the threat of climate change, we have to put the risks in perspective. Sure, nuclear waste is a problem, but the great thing about it is you know where it is and you can guard it. Nuclear power is safe, clean, efficient, and has the lowest cost of energy production." Let me talk about the application specifically. The application is asking for the County of Pueblo to create a vested property right on this land to allow its use for the clean energy park. If such a right is granted, it would be conditioned on strict compliance with the development plan, which is included in the PUD application. It is part of it. That development plan sets forth in 3 phases the timing of the development and what takes place in each of those phases. Phase 1 starts when and if the county grants the PUD application. For the sake of trying to clarify the timing, let me assume that this occurs March 15th of 2011, March 16th. Phase 1 will be completed by September 15th of 2013. During that time, the developer of nuclear energy and other forms of energy will be identified. The time will be used for the developers to determine whether the land proposed to be used in the water is suitable for establishing a clean energy park that includes a nuclear power plant. In much of what I've said tonight, I focused on a nuclear power plant, and as I've said, I'll talk mostly about that, but this is a clean energy park, one that would have solar, wind, geothermal, and biomass. Phase 1 is a critical phase because there are a number of things that could happen that could end this project. I may not find anyone in the world who believes that it is economically feasible to build a nuclear power plant in this region. I don't have anyone in my back pocket who's come to me and said, "I've got $5 to $8 billion, I want to spend it in Pueblo County. These county commissioners approve this." But I'm willing to try to find that company if this PUD application is approved. But it's no sure thing that I can identify such a company that would be willing to do this. Secondly, maybe if I do identify such a company, the land won't be suitable, or the water won't be suitable. Maybe the land has, maybe somebody can find some seismographic activity. The study the county did, the emergency preparedness study that the county did in the 1990s showed no earthquake activity in this area, but who knows? Geological testing, they'll spend $5 to $7 million doing tests on this ground to be sure it can be used for a nuclear power plant before it will be approved. So there are things that could happen that would make this not possible in phase one. If you approve this phase, if you approve this application, I'm willing to try to find that developer. Before going on with phases 2 and 3 and their timing, let me comment on my vision for the kind of company that I'd be looking at to develop a clean energy park. I will ask PEDCO to help me if this application is approved, finding that company. That company is going to have to demonstrate that it has the financial capability of building a $5 to $8 billion plant. It's going to have to demonstrate that it knows and is familiar with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission application process. It's going to have to agree to pay Davis-Bacon wages to all contractors and subcontractors and to provide health care benefits to all contractors and subcontractors in this project. It's going to have to agree to use local subcontractors whenever possible. And there are some subcontractors in this community that could benefit from this. It's going to have to agree to set aside a certain amount of energy for sale in Pueblo County at a price equal to the lowest price they'd sell energy to anybody else. And it's going to have to agree to pay my company, Pueblo for energizing our community, a fraction of a cent per kilowatt hour of energy generated in the future. As I've said in the application, if we can't find that kind of a company, or if we find it in the land and water aren't suitable, this application and the zoning is erased as an automatic feature of the zone. That's part of the flexibility built into it that I'm recommending to you. In phase 2, if I can find the developer, we go to phase 2. It would commence no later than 30 months from the date this PUD application is approved. In my assumed example, if this approval came, and I'll just use March 16th, phase 2 would begin no later than September 16th of 2013. During the time period from the date of approval to that date, the developer will be doing all of the engineering and suitability testing for the land and water. By March 15th of 2013, the developer will submit to the county staff all of the normally submitted plats, specifications, infrastructure design that would normally accompany a zoning request of this type. Nothing will be omitted. My proposal is we submit to the staff 100% of what's required, with no exceptions. We would give the nuclear power plant developer a buffer zone of about 4,000 acres that would be used for security purposes, keep people away from the plant, etc. But it wouldn't be used for the actual plant development. The rest of the land would be used for solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, as we can get those energies to go in. I want to kind of just give you for comparison purposes only, a nuclear power plant could be located on 1/3 of a square mile. A wind farm generating the same 1,000 megawatts of power would cover 200 square miles. Okay? A solar array generating 1,000 megawatts of power would cover 50 square miles. So that puts this in perspective. I hope that kind of helps you see why something in addition to solar and wind is necessary. Once the submittals are made to the Pueblo Planning and Development Department, I propose another public hearing will be held to approve the specific site proposed to be used, the infrastructure for the site, and all the technical details. That second public hearing, however, I propose could not be used to change the use of the land, which all I'm asking you to do to approve is the use of this land for a clean energy park. My company would continue its efforts to bring other clean energy developers to the remaining 20,000 acres of land. In phase 2, the developer would submit an application to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the commission would conduct numerous public hearings on the project. The developer would have until September of 2019 to complete the Nuclear Regulatory Application process. And if it fails, if the Nuclear Regulatory Commission fails to approve it, again, the zoning comes off the land automatically. It's taken off. and it goes back to its current zone, which is A1. But if it's approved, construction will start almost immediately. Once electrical energy is being produced, there's going to be the benefit I mentioned earlier to the 12 interest groups I mentioned earlier. If we work together to make this happen, what do I think would be the benefits to the community? More than 2,500 construction jobs for a 4 to 5 year period. Jobs that would pay Davis-Bacon wages and have health care benefits. I told a friend of mine, Neil Hall, that I want him there at my side when we interview the companies to do this, so that he can make a presentation on behalf of union labor in this community and around the state and in other places. There'll be 500 to 700 permanent, high-paying jobs on site that have health care benefits. Permanent because it can't be moved. High-paying because surveys done of the wages paid in nuclear power plants among around 104 nuclear power plants in the United States show that the average wage is 36% higher than the average wage in the community they are located in. It will provide 1,500 to 2,000 jobs off-site that support the Clean Energy Park. I believe it will increase the educational opportunities for our K through 12 students. I also believe that Pueblo Community College would serve as the training ground for employees of the nuclear power plant. In the early 1960s, when the nuclear power plants were first developed, former Navy nuclear power people were hired for those plants. And what plant operators found out was, as soon as a better job was offered someplace else, those people left the community. Today, the way jobs are filled in nuclear power plants is the industry comes to the community and takes 2 years and trains community people, Puebloans, people who live in this area, about the jobs that are available in the nuclear power plant. They get them licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they're the ones that work at the nuclear power plants because they tend not to leave the community. I believe there'd be significant opportunities for grants to our local university and the other universities in the state of Colorado to study the environmental issues dealing with nuclear power plants, to study engineering things relative to nuclear power plants. I believe there'd be significant sales and use taxes that would benefit the entire community. Significant property taxes that would generate conservatively as much as $27 million a year to the county and $31 million a year to District 70 alone.